everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and it's time for my February reading wrap-up. So I read 11 books in the month of February, but I think I had overall a pretty good reading month. So like I said, I read 11 books, and of those books, I listened to 9 of them via audio. 1 was an ebook. 11 of them were books I physically owned, so that's a record for me. I don't know that that's happened in recent memory, that I physically own everything I read this month. That's wild. Didn't read anything from the library. 1 of them was an ARC. I ended up with 4 5-star reads, 3 DNFs. 1 book was a reread. I read 2 new releases, 3 books by BIPOC authors, 2 were LGBTQ+ books, and 2 were either middle grade or YA. I read 2 nonfiction books, and I hauled 12 books. I did not unhaul anything again this month, but that's okay. I will get there. I'll be interspersing reviews for the things I've made videos for, but for those that I did not make a specific video for, I will talk about that here. So kicking off the month, the first book I finished was Sharon McMahon's The Small and the Mighty. You can go check out my thoughts as well as Tanya's at the book club that we hosted for this. The ARG Book Club read this in January. My quick review is that this is a really inspiring collection of stories about Americans that maybe you have or maybe you have not heard about. So most of these are people who led very average, normal lives, except that they did a lot of amazing work for their community. And I think that right there is like the basis of the story, is that it doesn't matter if you're just a regular person, you can still do something. You have some ability in you to contribute to your community, and that contribution might reverberate out into the greater world around you. You don't know until you've done it, you know? And for that, I think this was a really inspiring book, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. But I did just finish reading The Indigo Girl by Natasha Boyd, so let's talk about it. This is a historical fiction story set in colonial America in 1739, and we're following Eliza Lucas, who is a real historical person, and this is a very well-researched book. I picked this up because I'm putting it in Build Your Library's Level 12 update. I'd been looking for something set in colonial America that would fit, and this is the one I chose. And I really like it because it's focused on a person whose story is rarely told. We tend to gloss over the contributions of women in history, and so I thought it would be a good story for that. Plus, it's just really well written and very compelling, but also a really easy read, which in level 12 there's a lot of dense stuff, so it's really nice to have something a little bit on the easier side. Okay, so let's talk about what this is about. This is a story about Eliza Lucas, and we're focused on her life in the year 1739. So she's 16, and her father has raised her, I don't want to say raised her like a son, but he's given her privileges that most girls don't have. She's been educated. She knows a lot about how to run business and stuff. So she's very intelligent and capable. And he has several land holdings, I think there's like 3 different plantations in South Carolina, as well as their lands that he runs in Antigua in the West Indies. And there's currently some war happening with the Spanish over there, so he goes to Antigua to work on dealing with that and focus his attentions that direction. And he asks Eliza to run the plantations for him in his absence. He does have a son, but he's away, so she's the one in charge right now. And she's thrilled at this opportunity to prove herself to her father, to her mother, who she has a very contentious relationship with, and to like have a chance to shine, to get to do the thing that she knows she's good at and that she's so capable of doing, but is so frequently told that she should not be doing. And so she decides that one of the things she wants to do is to plant indigo, which is not a crop native to the Carolinas and is also not a crop that most people seem to know how to do. And it's very difficult to extract the dye from it. And so like it hasn't been done before in a way that's worked. So nobody really takes it seriously, but she is like, I can do this. I'm determined. So that's what she does. And it's a really interesting story, like seeing her overcoming all these different obstacles that are put into her path, and not just overcoming them, but like proving everyone wrong in the aftermath of it, like showing everybody that she is in fact capable of doing things, and that all women are if you just give them the opportunities to. So I really enjoyed this. I thought the writing was really great. The story was very compelling. I couldn't put it down at points because I just needed to know. Like the way it's written is very conducive to continuing reading, because you just want to know what's going to happen. I didn't know a lot about Eliza Lucas. I had heard of her. I knew a very little bit, so I really liked getting to read a whole story about her. And I thought this was a really great book. So my 3 words for this was just smart women succeed. And I love to see the smart women succeeding. It's great. And I gave this 4.5 stars. I finished reading Junie by Erin Crosby Eckstein. This is a historical fiction story about a girl named Junie who is enslaved on the Bellarine plantation in Alabama. And when we meet her, she's 16. It's 1860, so the Civil War is brewing, but she and the other enslaved people on the plantation are fully unaware of what's going on. Junie is a very different character from characters that I've read who are enslaved. She is the favorite of the daughter of the plantation owner, the McQueens. She's Violet's like best friend, even though she's her slave girl, but she's been raised and sort of attached to Violet her whole life, and they have this really unique bond. And like Violet taught her to read, and she writes poetry, and she's been educated, and she's not really, I don't want to say she's not aware of her predicament, because she is, but she's also not seeing it as like this terrible thing that has happened to her. Not right away anyway. So when the story starts, we know that her sister has died, and she feels responsible for Minnie's death. And one night she sees her ghost, and Minnie's ghost is asking her to do something. And so she's put on this like quest to find out what really happened to Minnie. And the more she learns, the deeper the secrets she's uncovering become, and it just sort of changes her entire outlook on life. We also have a side story with Violet, and Violet being the plantation owner's daughter. She's coming of age to get married, and it's really important to her mother that she marries and keeps them from losing everything in the potential, like what happens if something happens to your father who's a drunk, like if he dies, then we have nothing, so you have to get married. And Violet is kind of pushed into this marriage with a man who is just the worst. But and I'm like struggling to figure out how to talk about the story without giving away spoilers, but there's also like a romance between Junie and the man who comes to like court Violet, his slave, and they have this like really beautiful relationship where they build a friendship, and like the characters in this story are so rich and well developed. Like every single character in this book, even like side characters who you don't see terribly often, like they're all pretty intricately written. Like I really loved Junie as a character. Like I just thought she was so unique to this time period. And I did read the afterword that the author wrote, and she talks about how like when she wanted to read a story like this as she wrote it, and she wanted to find a character who was enslaved but wasn't either like drawn in such a way as they almost seem like they like slavery, but also not drawn in a way that it just focuses only on the horrors. Junie is somewhere in the middle. She's more balanced in that like she almost has an okay life on the surface if you don't think too hard about it. Like she's almost got it pretty good, but the more you think about it, the worse it feels, and like the more she starts to realize like, wait, I'm only ever going to be able to live in the margins of someone else's life. And it was such a good story. I really loved like the supernatural aspects of the story. I know that a lot of people aren't going to like that, but I thought it was really interesting. I really enjoy when a story delves into the supernatural and then like really digs into it. And like I thought the way that the story did that was so good. I loved all of the ghost stuff. I really loved the story. The writing was beautiful. I'm definitely putting this in the level 12 update. Like I have a slot that I needed to fill, and I kept like going back and forth on some other books, and as I was reading this, I just kept going, could this be the book? And so I bought a copy because I read the ARC for this, and I need to own it. Like I want to own it anyway because I want to annotate it. I want to read it again, and like there were so many beautiful lines, and I want to reread it. But I think it's going to be a really good fit in the level 12 update. So anyway, my 3 words for this one was layered, hopeful, and complex. And I gave it 5 stars. Like this was amazing. And I think excellent historical fiction. In my same sweatshirt, because I read both of these. I finished both of these on the same day. I finished reading Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. Let's try to talk about it. Like I don't know how to talk about this because it's a sequel, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I don't really know that I can go into the plot without accidentally spoiling. And oh my god, there are so many things that happen in this. So this is book 2 in the Legendborn cycle. It is a trilogy. The 3rd book is coming out next month, so that's why I wanted to get this read, because I wanted to catch up in time for the 3rd book to come out. So this is a story about a girl named Bree who is 16. Her mother dies. This is all from the 1st book, by the way. Her mother dies, and she's trying to find out what happened to her. She believes she had something to do with a secret society at the UNC Chapel Hill campus. So she goes to this summer program with her best friend and starts snooping around, and she gets involved in this group that it's basically like King Arthur legends, like the Round Table and all of that, but like I don't even know how to explain it. Like they embody the spirit of these knights, and it's like different levels, but they're like magic abilities and stuff. And Bree learns that she's not just a part of this group, but she's also a root crafter. She has this magic that is like African based, and she can do that, but she's also a medium, and so she's got all this power. And this book, oh my god, Like, I liked Legendborn a lot. I think I gave it either 4.5 or 5 stars. This was such an easy 5-star. Like, I was so sucked in to this story. I had such a hard time stopping when I needed to like take breaks and stuff. But like, I really wanted to just binge this. But I mean, it's a 22-hour audiobook. 10 hours when you speed it up, but still. Very fast-paced plot. Like, stuff just keeps happening. Like, there's no breaks. And then when there is a break, you get these like really great character moments. And let me just, Selwyn Kane. I've always been a sucker for the bad boy, and Selwyn Kane is just a lot. I love him. And I just, like, I don't generally like do book boyfriends and stuff, but if I were Bree, I would be with Selwyn like in a second. So like you have the whole like love triangle thing happening with her and Nick and Sel, and I'm just like, how can you pick somebody over Sel? I don't know. But there's so much that happens in this book. And I can't talk about any of it because it's all spoilers, but like I recommend this series. Like if you want to read more fantasy but you want to stay in our world, this is a great option because there is a whole lot of stuff you need to learn, and there's like a lot of world building, and it's really intricate, and like I still don't think I fully grasp all of it, but I don't have to because the story is still so enjoyable even if I don't quite get all the little details, you know? I'm still learning. So I definitely think this is a lot of fun. This is very action-packed. There are so many plot twists. Like there were moments that I gasped because I did not see the things that were happening coming, and I loved it. I love the characters. I think it's such a great series. So I cannot wait to read Oathbound. Oh my god. I might actually read it when it comes out. Like, do you know how rare that is for me? Like, that's what I just told Sarah. Like, I can't wait to get Oathbound and set it on my shelf for 2 years. But no, I think I might actually read it. So, anyway, definitely recommend this. Easy 5 stars. My 3 words were emotional, gut punch, and powerful. Ugh. Loved it so much. I have a whole video where I talked about my thoughts on the entire Wayward Children series, if you want to go check that out. But I want to do my specific review for Adrift in Currents, Clean and Clear by Shauna McGuire. This is the latest, or I think 10th book in the Wayward Children series, and it was not my favorite. I think this might be my least favorite of the collection thus far. My biggest issue with this is that the world that we are visiting, this is a story where you're in a portal world. The world we're visiting felt very unfinished. Like it didn't feel like a realized world the way the other ones did, and I had a really hard time picturing it. And so I found the stuff about Nadia, the main character in this, in the real world a lot more compelling than the stuff where she's in her portal world, which is not typical of the rest of the series. So I didn't love this. If you want to hear my full thoughts, go check out that video where I rank the Wayward Children series completely, but this was just okay for me. I ended up giving this 3 stars. My Monster Squad, my members for this channel, our first seasonal reads book club met in February, and we read Eleanor of Avignon by Elizabeth Delosier. And oh my gosh, this might be my favorite book I've read so far this year, or at least one of. I absolutely adore this story so much. It hits all the things that I want in a book. This has so many tropes that I love. There's twins. This is a story about a woman in science, specifically in medicine. She is living in the Middle Ages, so this is set right as the Black Death plague comes to Europe, and we're following a woman her mother was a midwife, but also considered to be a witch because of her skills with treating illness and using herbs. And she's learned a lot from her mother, but is also very like nervous about doing anything with that knowledge because she knows the dangers of being branded a witch. But she also feels compelled to help with the skills that she has. And she ends up being an apprentice to the physician, to the Pope, and she winds up being like right in the thick of it with the Black Death and trying to figure out what to do. What I loved about this so much is that it focuses on a real time and place, and some of the characters in this book are real people. Eleanor is not. She is a fully fictional character, but she blends in so seamlessly to this world. I love that you can see they were doing so much research as to like, how do we defeat this? What do we do with this plague? How can we look in history and see what did they do in the past when we had things like this? And like they had to get permission from the Pope to be able to do human dissection and autopsies on the bodies of people who died of the plague so that they could better understand it. And that puts them in a lot of danger. There's just so much in here to love. If you love historical fiction and you love historical fiction that is really well researched and just so beautifully written, like I could smell the city. I could feel like I felt like I was there. I felt her emotions through the story. I loved this. Wonderful historical fiction. This was an easy 5 stars for me. I read one middle grade in February. I kind of wanted something cute and fluffy, and so I read Noah Fry Gets Crushed by Maggie Horn. This was adorable, and I really enjoyed it. This is a story about a girl named Noah who's starting, I think, 7th grade at the beginning of the novel, and all of her friends are getting really excited about boys and just talking nonstop about the boys they have crushes on, boyfriends, and all of that. And she just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand a lot of what they're talking about because she has not experienced a crush on a boy. And she also has a new best friend that she met while she was at science camp over the summer. They've gotten really close, and this new best friend, Jessa, has now moved to her hometown, so they're at school together. And she's so excited about bringing this new friend into her friend group, and she's decided to devise an experiment where she's gonna test a hypothesis to see if she pretends to have a crush on a boy, if those feelings will become real, and then she'll finally be able to talk to her friends in a way that makes her feel like she belongs to this group again. And that is what she does. And over the course of the story, she realizes that it isn't a boy she has a crush on. It's Jessa, her new best friend. And it took the whole story for her to kind of feel like, oh wait, that's what those feelings are? And I just thought this was adorable. I loved the acceptance in this story from her friends and everyone around her. I love the adults in her life stepping in and kind of trying to help guide her to understanding the things that she's feeling. I just thought this was really well done. Really cute story. I feel like this, despite it looking so like pink and cutesy, would be a great story for any gender to read, and I think you should definitely check this out. I gave this 4.5 stars. I just finished reading Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron, so let's chat about it. This is a YA fantasy fairy tale retelling, and it is Kalynn Bayron's debut. I felt like this was like a really... It felt very like early 2000s YA, and I looked at the copyright to see like when did this come out, and it came out in 2020. So that's really like, it felt nostalgic in a way, even though like that I wasn't like a teen then, but I was reading a lot more YA back then. And I was reading a lot more YA fantasy back in the early days of my YouTube channel, because that's what everyone was reading, so that's what I was trying to read too. So like this just had like a weird nostalgic feel to it, so I really liked it for that. This is a story about a girl named Sophia who lives in this kingdom that's the real Cinderella really existed, and they base like their whole society on the Cinderella story, but in a very like patriarchal way, where like the girls are forced into, like, they have to go to the ball and they have to be chosen by the prince, but like it's any man who will like take up one of them and like choose her for his wife. And like if you aren't chosen by the time you're 18, you're a spinster and bad things will happen to you. Like it ruins your life basically. And so like they have to go to this ball, they have to dress up, and like if you're very good, if you do everything just right, maybe the fairy godmother will come and like help you to get the prince. But like obviously that's not going to happen. That's not how it works. Nobody ever has that happen. Sometimes girls just seem to disappear after attending a ball, or after like maybe 2 tries at going to the ball. They'll just disappear, or they'll turn up dead, or something bad will happen to them. They'll get sent away. And Sophia doesn't want to partake in any of this. She doesn't want to get married to a man at all. She ends up like, there's a whole thing going on with like her taking down the system. And it was fun. Like I haven't read anything like this in a little while. I haven't done a lot of like YA fantasy, or really any fantasy really, in a little bit. So it was a nice kind of brain cleanse from some of the other stuff I've been reading. Just like to just read a book where I didn't have to use my brain and I could just kind of zone out and listen to the story, and it was nice. There's also a little bit of a romance happening in this story with Sophia and this other character she meets along the way named Constance, and like that was really exciting for me because I was super nervous about finding a book to read for the Build Your Library Reading Challenge prompt to read a sapphic romance, because I don't read a lot of romance, and I wasn't sure if I would just like stumble onto a book or not, and I did, and I'm thrilled because now I've knocked out that prompt. But yeah, so it's not like the whole story, but it is a part of the story, so I think it counts. It works. I gave this 3.5 stars. I liked it. It was a good time. But like I didn't think it was as good as her later books. Like this felt like a debut. But I do want to read more of her backlist. I feel like there's so much potential here. Like this felt like a debut, but it also felt like she had a lot to say. And I would like to read more. I just read The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, and this is the story of the women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. I read this with Regina. This was part of our Morbid Curiosities murder unit. We've been studying about Jack the Ripper and those murders, and I wanted to read this with her because I thought it would be an interesting take on the history. And oh my gosh, I ended up really, really enjoying this. I knew I would. I knew I was going to like this book. But I thought it was really well done. This is Hallie Rubenhold telling the story about the women themselves. Who were these women who were killed by Jack the Ripper? There's a lot of stuff we could get into here, and I'm not gonna like do a whole treatise on Jack the Ripper. But what she does with this book is give them their voice and their story back, because we're all led to believe that these were just 5 random prostitutes that he killed, that was the MO of Jack the Ripper and all of that. And she debunks that myth entirely. Only one of the women killed was actually said to be a prostitute. Everyone else was just homeless. And like there's this whole thread you can see through the lives of these women about like what it meant to be from the lower classes in Victorian society, and like what we think of as Victorian is often the more well-off people, but this was more like the Victorian slums, and what was a workhouse really like, and what led people to even go to such places, and if you wanted to avoid the workhouse, what would you do? And it talks a lot about the life of women in this time, and it's really an interesting study about Victorian society, but also about like the misogyny that ruled over their lives and how women had almost no ability or power to take care of themselves if they didn't have a man. And even women who were poor and destitute often had to find a man who they could live with, who could like take care of them so that they wouldn't have to live on the street. And even then, they sometimes were still forced to sleep rough or, you know, live out on the street because there wasn't really anything else for them. And also, it was a really interesting take too, because all these women, the thing that they had in common besides being poor was they were all alcoholics. And alcohol was this thing that you could see had ruined all of their lives in some way, which was really sad. I thought this was a really interesting read. I think it really made me like rethink a lot of stuff that I thought I knew about Jack the Ripper, which I already didn't really think was accurate. Like I've read and other things talking about how like they really didn't have a lot of evidence, and what evidence they did have was often made up. But like this really does turn the story on its head a lot and make you stop and think, like, what motive did the journalists have? Did the police have for making the assumptions that they did? So highly recommend this. I gave this 4 stars. I remember talking to Regina about it, and the thing that stuck out to me that I thought about the most while reading this was Les Miserables and Fantine's story. And I just kept thinking about that as I was listening. Like, any woman in this situation could have fallen down into this hole of destitution, and like Fantine's story is a great like visual to like hinge it on, even though it's a different time period in a different country. Still, I think it fits. And my 3-word review was bleak, well-researched, and humbling, because it really did make me see things in a completely different light. Regina and I read Scythe by Neal Shusterman this past month. I was so excited. I was so excited to introduce her to this world. It took us 2 months to finish it because of stuff and sickness and whatnot, but we did it. We finished Scythe. I'm hoping she'll let me read Thunderhead next. If you've never read this before, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You should read this. This is a book I've read, I don't even know how many times at this point. I think at least 4. I think I've read it 4 times. This is a young adult, I'm going to say speculative. I've called this in the past dystopian, but it does get to be a dystopian book eventually, but it starts out utopian, because we begin this story with a world in which we have conquered death. There is no more disease, there is no more death, none of that exists anymore, because we've figured out how to become immortal. And we can live forever, but we need to make sure we keep the population under control, and to do that we have ordained scythes. And scythes are tasked with culling the population. They are state-sanctioned killers. But they don't call it killing, it's gleaning. And so we're following 2 characters who become apprenticed to become scythes, and all the things that ensue because of that. Also, we no longer have like a government and things like that, because the cloud has become sentient, and we call it the Thunderhead. And the Thunderhead is perfectly unbiased and is much more fair. And therefore we have a society where there's no crime, there's no death. Like, we have a perfect world. What does that look like, and can we maintain it? And that is the question this series asks. Like, what happens to people when they are immortal? What happens when you give people the power to kill indiscriminately? What happens in a society like that? This is such a great trilogy. If you've never read it, oh my gosh, you need to. This is one of my absolute favorite trilogies of all time. I've talked about it numerous times on this channel before, so if you're new here and this is your first time hearing me talk about it, back up a bit and go look at my past videos. I've talked about this a lot, but I read this with Regina. Her reactions to things were great. I had a lot of fun sharing this story with her, so very excited to move on to Thunderhead. And then the last book I want to talk about is the book we read for the ARG Book Club in February, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. I'm actually filming this an hour before we have our live show, and so I'm wondering what my thoughts will be by the end of that. But right now, I am still like working out my feelings for this book. I liked it a lot, but I feel like I need to read it one more time. And this time I want to go through like really slowly because I feel like while this is a very simple story, there's still a lot happening. It feels like weirdly simple, but also weirdly complex at the same time, because we're following this character who is never named. It's an anonymous girl, and she's telling the story about her life. In like the beginning of this, we learn that she is living in this like underground bunker cage situation with 39 other women, and they've been trapped there for some time. Nobody knows how long. Nobody can really fully remember their life before they were here. There are 3 male guards that watch over them, and that is their existence. They are just here in this bunker, in this cage underground, and none of them knew each other prior to being here. They're all strangers, and they're just here. But where is here? We don't know. It's just a place that they are trapped. And we're following this character who was the youngest to be here, and she comes of age. It's like almost a coming of age story in a way, but like we follow her through her entire life, and as she's on this weird like journey to understand what makes her human and what it is to be a woman, and what it is to be a woman who doesn't live among men. And it's a really interesting story. It's super short. Like it's less than 200 pages. And like that's why I say it feels really simple, and yet it still has so much like philosophical underpinnings to like, this is really a story about what it is to be human. What does it mean to be a woman if you've never been around men? If the only experience you have of men are these 3 silent guards that just watch you, and you have no communication. She's never even heard a man's voice. And so it's a really weird story. And I don't really know how to talk about it yet. And I'm still thinking, I'm very excited for book club because I feel like I need to hash out my thoughts better there. But so definitely go check out that live show if you want more information about this story. But I did really like it. I gave this 4 stars. So what did I DNF this month? Because I said I DNF'd 3 things. So at the beginning of the month, I DNF'd The East Indian. And I DNF'd that because it was just not what I wanted for Build Your Library Level 12. That's what I was reading it for. I was looking for a book set in colonial America, and this was just, I felt unnecessarily depressing. There was some really dark, awful things happening to some of the characters. At one point, there was a 9-year-old boy who committed suicide, and that was where I just put it down and said, nah. This is not it. This is not what I want here. So I may go back at some point and finish it just out of sheer curiosity, because it was a book that I was very curious about, but it's not for that. And so I had to set it aside. I also DNF'd If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And this was so disappointing because this was my 5-star prediction for February, and it just didn't work for me at all. My main issue with this is that I didn't care. I did not feel compelled to continue the story. The characters were all somehow both annoying and bland. I did not care about any of them, and I just felt bored while I was reading it, and I felt like if I pushed myself through, I would get myself into a reading slump, and I don't want to do that. So I just went, never mind, and I DNF'd it. But I don't know. I again, could be just like I'm not in the right mind space for this book right now. Like my brain is kind of mushy at the moment from everything, but I just didn't like this. Which was so disappointing because I was absolutely certain I was going to love it. So can't always judge a book by the cover. Like, the cover of this book is absolutely my favorite thing ever. I want to frame it. I don't know what to do. We'll see. I might come back to it. And then the last book I DNF'd was The Bone People. And this was another really disappointing DNF because, again, is my brain just too mushy right now for this? I read the prologue twice, felt really confused, went on to start the first chapter, got a few minutes into that and went, no, nope, no, I can't right now. I don't know. This is one of those books that is, I don't want to use the word pretentious because that feels like not the right word, but it kind of also is the right word, you know what I mean? But it feels like one of those books where they're trying to do something different, and I feel like it's also something from another culture because this is a story that I think is about like the Maori, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is like a storytelling device they use. I don't know. What I do know is that I was fully lost, and I was reading this for the Build Your Library self-education unit that I'm writing, and if I don't understand it, I don't know how to write lesson plans for it, you know? I'm not lesson planning it, but I am trying to come up with like questions to make you think, stuff to help you like hash out the story as you're reading, and if I'm not able to do that, like I can't, you know? So I was just like, maybe not. So I put that aside. Again, will I read it again someday? I don't know. Maybe. I feel like it has potential to be a book I really do enjoy. It has so many good ratings. I just felt like I couldn't understand it. So I had to DNF that. But overall, again, I think I had a pretty good reading month. Let me know down below in the comments what was your favorite book that you read in the month of February. I think my favorite is going to Eleanor of Avignon. Nothing I read this month. Like, I read some good stuff, but this was like the one that is the standout for me. And I feel like this will be in my top 10 at the end of the year. I'm calling that now. I feel like I'm going to put this in my top 10. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below your favorite book you read this month was. I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.